position to speak today, but I am in the position to drink some raw titty milk. Oh, that's how milk should be.
You must observe our rules.
Reasons are number 7. It's effective against various brain disorders, and it can even increase mental clarity. Keto bodies such as beta-hydroxybutyrate can replace most of the glucose required by the brain. Now, your brain needs glucose, as some parts of it can only burn this type of sugar. That's why your liver produces glucose from protein if you don't eat any carbohydrates. Yet, a large part of your brain can also burn ketones, which are formed during starvation or when carbohydrate intake is very low. This is the mechanism behind the ketogenic diet, which has been used for decades to treat epilepsy in children who won't respond to drug treatment. In many cases, this diet can cure children of epilepsy. Very low carb and ketogenic diets are now being studied for other brain conditions as well, such as Alzheimer's. In Alzheimer's, amyloid-burdened neurons may be impaired in their ability to actually use glucose as an energy source. Ketones may provide an alternative energy source, reducing cell death and inflammation in Alzheimer's. And overall, the current evidence tends to indicate that a ketogenic diet does have cognitive benefits in patients diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, but more research is still needed for a conclusive result. Another brain disease, Parkinson's disease, which is a progressive neurodegenerative disorder characterized by the degeneration of dopaminergic neurons in the substantia nigra, resulting in dopamine deficiency and subsequent motor and non-motor impairments, has also seen improvements when ketone bodies are used as an alternative energy source for the brain. Nutritional ketosis may improve such things as mitochondrial efficiency, reduce oxidative stress and neuroinflammation, and potentially modulate what's called the alpha-synuclein aggregation and dopaminergic neuron vulnerability. Of course, much like Alzheimer's, this can reduce potential inflammation and cell death. But once again, more well-designed clinical trials are required to establish the efficacy, safety and the long-term benefits of ketogenic diet in Parkinson's disease. As with pain before, we spoke about glutamate and GABA. Now, glutamate's a neurotransmitter that promotes stimulation in the body and is vital for brain function and learning, whilst GABA, which is another neurotransmitter in the body, reduces stimulation. Anytime you talk, think, process information, glutamate is involved. But like anything in life, too much glutamate doesn't mean it's better. Glutamate should be able to convert into GABA, but sometimes the conversion doesn't occur as well as it should. Since glutamate is responsible for over 90% of the brain's synaptic connections, the brain can overprocess and won't have GABA available to assist in reducing that stimulation. If your body has too much glutamate and not enough GABA available, you'll likely experience brain fog, have trouble concentrating, potentially increased anxiety. Ketones provide the brain with another source of energy, allowing it to more efficiently process the extra glutamate into GABA. So, by helping increase the production of GABA, ketones can then help decrease the amount of extra neurons that are firing in the brain and improve mental focus. This also can actually help improve your memory, because ketone bodies in the brain can reduce free radicals, improving efficiency and energy levels in mitochondria, and even creating new mitochondria, which will increase ATP in your brain's glial and neuronal cells, particularly astrocytes. On the topic of the brain, reasons number 8, reduced anxiety and depression. What if we've been looking at mental illnesses wrong all along? What if it isn't a chronic chemical imbalance, but the result of problems with, say, energy metabolism, which we know affects thoughts, feelings, and behaviours? And what if that dysfunction could be reversed through lifestyle interventions that target the actual root causes? Because major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, and even schizophrenia have been linked to mitochondrial impairment, insulin resistance, cerebral glucose hypometabolism, and systemic inflammation. As I've previously mentioned, when you have too much glutamate, this occurs when there's an insufficient amount of GABA to balance it, and a decreased concentration of that GABA can produce feelings of anxiousness, and even has links to major depressive disorder. So with that being said, keto can alter cell-to-cell communication in the brain and may increase GABA, which reduces hyperexcitability in the neurons. Reasons number 9, improved heart health and reduced blood pressure. The ketogenic diet has been shown to have a multifaceted effect on the prevention and treatment of high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, heart disease, and strokes. It has a beneficial effect on blood lipid profiles, even compared to other diets. It shows strong anti-inflammatory and cardioprotective potential, which is due to, amongst other factors, the anti-inflammatory properties during the state of ketosis, the elimination of simple sugars, the restriction of total carbohydrates, and in particular the supply of omega fatty acids. In addition, ketone bodies provide a so-called rescue fuel for the diseased heart by affecting its metabolism. They also have a beneficial effect on the function of the vascular endothelium, including improving its function in inhibiting premature aging. Weight loss via keto also has a beneficial effect on blood pressure and other cardiovascular disease risk factors. As with all of this, employ fasting with keto, as for some people, using keto long-term may have negative effects on cardiovascular health. More research is still needed.
I don't think you're good enough.
Reasons number 10. Cleaner energy and sustained energy. Ketones are actually a more efficient energy source than glucose because of the reduced amount of destructive free radicals produced. And in the brain, energy is everything. This helps better protect the brain and the rest of the body from oxidative stress, which negatively affects mental performance and brain aging. Damaged mitochondria, reactive oxygen species excess, and atypical glucose metabolism have a very close relationship with each other. Inflammation in the brain can be partially due to dysfunctional mitochondria, which then produce reactive oxygen species. That in turn causes oxidative stress, and this actually has links to depression. People with depression have reduced amounts of ATP in their brain. So, ketogenic diets make it easier for people to produce ATP who have mitochondrial dysfunction. Fat contains more than twice the calories of a gram of carbohydrates or protein, 9 kilocalories per gram versus 4 kilocalories per gram for carbohydrates and protein. Thus, reducing total fat intake may theoretically lead to an appreciable impact on the total calories consumed and long-term weight loss. Reasons number 11. Reduction of triglycerides and improved cholesterol levels. Triglycerides are fat molecules that circulate around in your bloodstream. It is well known that high fasting triglycerides, levels in the blood after an overnight fast, are a strong heart disease risk factor. One of the main drivers of elevated triglycerides in sedentary people is carbohydrate consumption, especially the simple sugar fructose found in fruit. When people cut carbohydrates, they tend to experience a very dramatic reduction in blood triglycerides. On the other hand, low-fat diets often cause triglycerides to increase. Now, I will elaborate about good and bad forms of cholesterol and the myths that surround that. But in general, we say that high-density lipoproteins, HDL, is often the so-called good cholesterol. And typically, the higher levels of HDL relative to bad LDL, low-density lipoprotein, lower the risk of heart disease. One of the best ways to increase the good HDL levels is to eat fat, and low-carb diets often include a lot of fat. Therefore, it is unsurprising that HDL levels increase dramatically on healthy, low-carb diets, while they tend to increase only moderately or even decline on low-fat diets. People who have high, quote, bad LDL are much more likely to have heart attacks. However, the size of the particles is important here, which will bust the myth of bad cholesterol. Smaller particles are linked to higher risk of heart disease, whilst larger particles are linked to a lower risk. And so it turns out on low-carb diets and keto that these increase the size of the, quote, bad LDL particles whilst reducing the number of total LDL particles in your bloodstream. As such, lowering your carbohydrate intake can boost your heart health. I will elaborate in further videos the myths on so-called good and bad cholesterol, but that is a general overview here of the relationship of HDL and LDL with high and low carb diets, such as keto. A simple one here. Reason number 12 is effective against metabolic syndromes. Metabolic syndrome is a condition highly associated with your risk of diabetes and heart disease. In fact, simply put, metabolic syndrome is a collection of symptoms, which include, for example, abdominal obesity, elevated blood pressure, elevated fasting blood sugar levels, high triglycerides, and the low good HDL cholesterol levels. Keto is incredibly effective in treating all of these symptoms and thus is very effective against metabolic syndromes.
You would be the only one.
Reasons number 13. Increase physical endurance and muscle sparing. While other diets like low-fat ones will potentially see a loss of muscle, ultimately lowering basal metabolic rate, if done right, keto spares muscle. As we become fat adapted, the body is less likely to use glycogen for energy. It is better at accessing stored fat, and that becomes a preferential fuel source. This leads to greater energy availability, which may support muscle growth and recovery. By preserving glycogen stores in muscles, keto can help athletes maintain energy levels during prolonged training sessions or even competition. Reduced inflammation through keto also improves muscle recovery and growth, allowing for the repair and regeneration of muscle tissue and quicker recovery between workouts. The improvement in mitochondrial function can further support muscle growth and recovery. We also spoke of hormones earlier. The role of hormones in muscle building, for example, includes insulin sensitivity, which can be improved on keto, allowing for more efficient nutrient partitioning and potentially contributing to muscle growth. Ketosis again provides a greater energy substrate for muscle protein synthesis, increases the production of growth hormone and testosterone, both of which play essential roles in muscle growth and repair. A key concern among those considering keto for muscle building is whether adequate protein intake can be maintained to support muscle protein synthesis. Research suggests that moderate protein consumption, 1.2 to 1.7 grams per kilo body weight, can promote muscle growth on keto. In fact, a higher protein intake may even be beneficial, as it can increase muscle protein synthesis while sparing muscle tissue from catabolism. Some studies have shown that a well-formulated keto diet can help preserve lean body mass during weight loss, while others have reported similar gains in muscle mass and strength between keto and non-keto dieters following resistance training programs. Reason number 14, effective against various cancers. Haha, screw you, Big Pharma.
You've got courage.
Cancer cells need more glucose for normal cells to generate ATP to survive. Following the Warburg effect, cancer cells activate aerobic glycolysis as a metabolic pathway. This programming features alterations in glucose, lipid, and amino acid metabolism, favouring production towards the cancer cells away from the healthy cells. Cancer cells can also elevate lactate production, glutamine metabolism, fatty acid synthesis, and decrease fatty acid oxidation. Keep this last point in mind. Other factors involved in cancer and keto here include high blood glucose levels and insulin, inflammation, and pro-inflammatory factors. By targeting the Warburg effect, keto has shown anti-tumour effects by reducing energy supplies to tumour cells. This is caused by a metabolic shift from glycolysis into mitochondrial metabolism and fatty oxidation. This low energy supply inhibits tumour growth, causing the starvation of tumour cells. Fucking take that. Ketosis and fatty oxidation are, on the most part, of negative consequence to the proliferation and survival of cancer. However, there are some cancers such as melanomas that actually thrive on fatty acids. I will address this in an upcoming video that purely focuses on keto and cancer. But most cancers hate keto, and we love it. And lastly, reason number 15, you may even live longer. Ketosis can generate neuroprotective effects, which may lead to improvement in health status and delay both aging and the development of related diseases through improving mitochondrial function, antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects against oxidative stress, histone and non-histone acetylation, methylation, modulation of neurotransmitter systems, and RNA functions. This may mitigate aging processes, delay the onset of age-associated diseases, and extend lifespan. In terms of insulin resistance, autophagy, feeding behavior, as well as exercise performance, beta-hydroxybutyrate serves as an epigenetic regulator, serving as a signaling biomolecule to affect cellular functions. More research is needed, but it is very, very promising.